Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Psychedelic Art Exchange YouTube channel. In place of our usual auction reviews, today we're going to take a little break and talk about something that's integral to not only our business, but our family and our life on this earth, the Grateful Dead. In just a few days from now, it will be 30 years since the death of Jerry Garcia. Just a few months ago, I celebrated my 30th birthday. My life is as entwined with this band as it could possibly be. I'm the child of two deadheads, and it's quite likely that I wouldn't exist at all if it weren't for Jerry and the Dead. So it feels pretty important to us to take some time to reflect on the importance of this band in our lives 30 years after they ended in their original form. We have tons to say, and of course, posters to show off. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I mean, like Katie said, and it seems almost a little weird to say that she wouldn't exist if not for the Grateful Dead. But I mean, you know, life being as it is, it was that thread through my development as an adolescent and a young adult that sort of formed all of my friendships and romances. So yeah, Katie is a product of that. There was no escaping that.
Yeah.
I've never really been able to escape it either. I mean, there was the Grateful Dead crept into my life from a very early time through the music that my brothers were playing through their walls, and it just never ceased. The time it really, I think, got to me, I was watching late night television. It was I'd watch Monty Python, then Saturday Night Live, and then there was this show like Rock Concert or something like that, and on came the animation sequence from the Dead movie,
Mm-hmm.
and I was transfixed, and I had to find out more about it. But it didn't all come on at once. I mean, there was
Sure.
a lot of musical influences in my life. I went,
Mhm.
my first love was the Beatles, and then Hendrix, and and I found my way around, and the Dead were always there. And even at one point, it was almost like too popular, and I kind of
Sure.
tried to ignore it, but it just, again, it kept sucking me in. I grew up in like an affluent Jewish community in Baltimore, Maryland, and there were a lot of kids that still hung onto that sort of bohemian ideal. And then the draw of the music and all of it, it really, it's been a thread that's been connected by music, friendship, and getting high and having a good time, and it really led to a lot of other musical discoveries for me, and it drew me to the posters. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's all in here. So this is a bit of a family story, if
Sure.
if but I find that we have to have this talk. It sort of is, it's required at this point.
Yeah.
60 years since the beginning of this band, and yeah, as Katie said, this weekend in San Francisco is a 3-day celebration in Golden Gate Park with Dead and Co. and some amazing guests. I mean,
Hmm.
the guests couldn't be more on. You have Billy Strings, Sturgill Simpson, and Trey.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I'm having a bit of FOMO, but um, Katie and I and her husband and her mom went to see the Sphere thing this past spring. So that's sort
Whew.
of used up our discretionary travel music budget.
Well,
But
yeah. And I mean, 10 years ago, which is crazy that it was 10 years ago, we packed into the car in Baltimore to drive to Chicago to see Fare Thee Well, which was, I don't think like either of us had any idea what to expect with that. And I'd never been to Chicago. I'd never seen, I mean, I'm sure you dragged me to see some Dead members when I was younger, but like it wasn't really within my waking memory.
Mickey, and it wasn't, it was
Yeah.
Mickey. Yeah.
And so it was the first time I'd seen any of them. And it was just, I mean, that's as close as you can get for me. It was magical. It was so crazy.
Oh, I
Um,
remember being packed into Soldier
oh, it
Field
was
and couldn't move. I mean,
crazy.
I didn't drink beer so that I wouldn't have to try to deal with the bathroom lines.
Yeah.
It was so tight, but it was really, the vibe was strong. It really was. It was beautiful, and I found a whole new respect for Trey through that,
Yeah.
and and it was, the last time really those guys were all together.
It is the last
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And then I mean Dead and Company came shortly after, and we've seen them a handful of times and it's been fun. But that was really special. And yeah, we are having a little bit of FOMO for not being in San Francisco right now.
Yeah, I
But
mean, yeah,
you can't go to all of them.
yeah, I mean, I love that city. I mean, that's really, I fell in love with San Francisco because of the Grateful Dead. When I was 19, I flew out to my first New Year's run, and it was at the Oakland Civic Auditorium, which became, or the Civic Center that became the Henry J. Kaiser, and it was still kind of an innocent scene back then. I was all the way on the West Coast, and
Mm-hmm.
it was that the little park in front of the Kaiser was full of, there was very little vending. I mean, finding a shirt was like sort of a real task.
When did you find this one?
Oh God, that was probably bought at a show. I mean, I had a whole obsession with swag along the way, and bought a bunch of shirts, which you're inheriting now.
Yeah, I get a handful of them every year in the mail for holidays.
It's they and some of them are unworn because I was that.
Yeah.
I've always been a collector. This is the disease that ties us together, and so going to San Francisco to see the Dead. I mean, I saw 82, 83 New Year's, which was Etta James, Tower Power of Horns, with Cipollina, with the dinosaurs were open. It still had the remnants of the scene that happened. I mean, the hate was dirty, it was nasty, it was, and San Francisco it still had that bohemian 60s vibe that was lying below the surface. It wasn't as gentrified as it's become, and we were in Oakland, so I had to take Bart over into the city just to see it. And probably the first time I just did the Fisherman's Wharf and and North Beach and all the typical tourist stuff. But it really did have a vibe and a flair. Back then, I was a underground comic book collector, so that's what I was searching for. I was going to the comic shops and trying to find all the 60s hippie comics, and I wasn't looking for the posters. It was another couple years before I discovered Ben Friedman, and then it was all over. I walked into that place and did the whole Ben Friedman game, and bought a handful of posters and took them back and took them to a framer where they dry mounted them and put them in crappy frames, and they just hung on my walls. In fact, I have, the examples that I'm bringing today are not, anything but personal examples that have lived with me forever. And this was the first poster that I got from Ben, and it was tough to get him. If he knew you wanted something, he would play it out so hard for like forever. You had to hang there for a couple hours and talk to him, and just before he would let you have what you wanted, and buy a bunch of. It was theater. He was a real character, Ben Friedman. And
it must be a common thing for poster people then.
Yeah, we're all a bit of, it's where music and art met for me.
Yeah.
And many of the same artists that I loved from the underground comics were, had done posters along the way. Most notably, Rick. This poster's always been probably my favorite design if I had to.
Sure.
But it, so I was digging for comics, and I think that was the first time I ever bought anything in the Bay Area, and I was not looking at posters, but 2 years later, that's all I wanted. And it was just for design and band. It wasn't for it wasn't for anything else. But I was I was enthralled. I was in San Francisco. In fact, in '83 New Year's, the shows were in San Francisco, in front of City Hall. The whole Civic Center area was filled with Deadheads. It was the San Francisco Civic Center, now the Bill Graham Civic Center. But that was great. I was like, I'm seeing the Grateful Dead in San Francisco. It was, it was magical. I was all wide-eyed and but that's when the poster obsession right around there started.
Uh-huh.
So, and then what happened? Then, then marriage and kids, and in 95 Katie was born,
Yeah.
and Jerry left, and my last show was RFK 95, and I had to leave her mom at home, and she I don't she was postpartum and everything and hasn't forgiven me to this day probably, but yeah, it was like 2 weeks after you were born. Yeah, and I had to go.
Well,
Yeah.
you knew, I guess, on some level.
Well, no,
like
I was hedonistic and irresponsible, but now a father. So this was where the whole thing,
right.
it changed. I had to leave the Garden of Eden and, deal with responsibility. And I mean, to some degree, I never have been able to give up the live music obsession or the poster obsession. The reason that this poster is out, because this was the poster that hung in the family house in the kitchen. It was the first thing you probably ever, associated with posters. We had a bunch in the basement, but this was one of the rare ones that was allowed in the house. I had the pool room where I was, all the stuff was allowed.
Which, I mean, I would look at those all the time, and some of them are really weird, especially when you're like a child. You're like, what the heck is that? And so many of them stood out to me, and like, I can't really think off the top of my head, but whenever I see them, I'm like, I remember looking at that when I was like 5 years old and being like, what is going on here?
Yeah. So, this child was in that petri dish where music and art met. And, I was just a collector. I never thought about selling this. And I had, at the time, some pretty powerful Grateful Dead posters. Since then, I've kind of filtered them through the business, and I kind of wish I had some of them back. But I hold these again. I get to touch them every day. I don't really need to have them on my wall. And
you don't have wall space anyway.
Yeah,
for
that's
them,
accurate. I've got a lot of stuff, but
yeah, and I mean, I gotta say, because it's important to me, but when I was in college and I wanted to start getting tattoos, the first tattoo I ever got is the blue rose from that poster. I can't show it to you because it's on my back. Yeah. But it was like, what else am I going to get? What's more, your first tattoo usually means something to you. The other ones, not so much. But I was like, what can I get that's going to be that important to me? And that was what I landed on.
And it was also gracefully accepted by your parents, so who would if it had been some ugly thing, we probably would have been, not great with it. But anyhow, that's
you caught on. It's fine.
Yeah, but she never stood a chance. The music was coming through the walls. The art was on the walls. Katie is a product of this, and that sort of segues into what I wanted to talk about. Is that these years, you don't notice it until something lines it up, like this event in San Francisco. But most notably, the other day, a friend of mine forwarded me this reel about this project of photography by this guy, Bill Lemke, who took portraits during the 80s, black and white portraits of deadheads, and from 85 to 91. And they're really stunning. And this was the era where I was all into it. 85, it was 20 years so far. They played at Merriweather in my backyard. That was a wonderful tour. Hershey, there was some, 85 was great. And that's this is when this guy started taking these photos, and they're lovely photos. But the real catch is that one of these subjects came back to him and requested that he do a portrait of him and his daughter. And it started this whole photo series of him taking photos of deadheads 40 years apart. So you had, and it's really touching. It really it reached me in a way that I didn't expect it to. And I guess it's all tied into mourning my youth and really realizing my mortality. I mean, I guess it's all about, death. But what is really also profound is that this thing still lives, and that there is a generation of people that get this, and that this thing lives beyond, that it's the music. It's, it's played like a symphony would play, Beethoven or Mozart. It's transcended the original players, and some of us older cats have a problem with that. It's like, it's the same way, whatever. But it's that's not the point. It still lives, and it's the interpretation that it is nowadays. When I started seeing the Dead, they were like, you never saw Pig, you didn't see shit,
Right,
So it's like,
yeah.
it's ego, it's identity, and we all have a lot of identity wrapped up in this thing. It's
Yeah.
impossible. Like I say, 99% of my friends and are through this ridiculous music drug cult. It's
Well,
but
yeah, and beyond that, I mean, for me, like, I'm a musician. I play punk rock, so I don't really, play any of the same kind of music. But I feel like there's so much, and I've talked about this before, but so much that I learned just by listening to the Grateful Dead my whole life.
well, because it's all in there. That's the thing about the Grateful Dead, and I understand taste is taste, but I've really, I think that, like, again, people that really have a disdain for it are disdaining the whole thing without really listening, because
I
there's like
agree.
every style of music is in there. I could drop, the needle on a track and get to somebody some way. That's a challenge that I take, because it's,
Yeah.
it's an amalgamation of many different musical styles. But the fact that it's tied to this culture, and some people reject that, it doesn't fit in. But in fact, punks aren't that, though. There are punk bands that revere the Grateful Dead. Jello, right? Jello Biafra was super into the Dead.
Well,
Is that
he's
correct?
from San Francisco,
Yeah,
so
and
I guess that would make sense. But I mean, I know plenty of punks that love the Dead. When we went to the Sphere a few months ago, there were a bunch of my punk friends were there. It's the subcultures are so similar. You just wear different colored
yeah,
clothes.
it's just it's style. It's
Yeah.
and again, a connection to music and community, and some sort of driving ethos, I guess. Yeah. I mean, this is hung on because it is something that it allows everyone in. Yeah,
Hmm.
and it sort of touches, many lives. Not
Yeah.
everyone's, but it touches many. And I've, you know somehow dovetailed it into a career, and with all these posters, and it touches the collectibles thing, and it's
Hmm.
still, it's astounding that it's still something that drives me, and the music still it touches me, and I still hear new things. It's a constant evolution, and it's been a friend for life.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like a few years ago, I feel like it was maybe a holiday or something, but you called me like, and it was like late here. It must have been like sort of the middle of the night for you. And you were like, you gotta listen to this specific song from this specific show. You're like in tears, like, I never noticed, I never like realized that
Well,
this was like,
yeah. Again, I mean, the Jerry's tone, and how it's developed over the
mm,
years, and just how
tone.
the whole thing has had 4 or 5 or 6 evolutions, and yeah, it's meaningful, and it's 60 years, and these posters are wonderful, and now Grateful Dead posters are starting to get record prices after record prices. It was always Hendrix posters, and Zeppelin, and Stones, and Beatles that really took the top, but the Dead material is really, again, this was a poster that was, well, it was bootleg the hell out of, but I remember it
Hmm.
being available for, a couple $100, and now it goes for several thousand. Because it's a great design. Mouse and
It
Clan
is.
nailed this, and it was, the show that it was sort of the end of an era,
Hmm.
and yeah, all those
You
things.
can
So
watch it on YouTube.
yeah, I mean, and I mean, that's the cool thing, though, is that you can go find, like, if look at the posters they play, the shows they played on these posters, and go back and listen to the shows, and
Yeah.
whatnot. But regardless, I'm really, grateful. I'm happy to have been a part of all of this. It's yeah. I mean, I think we've said it all. I don't know. Is there anything?
I think that,
I mean,
we
the sphere, that was pretty wild. I have to say that even touched me. I was really like kind of, skeptical about it, and then I was just, I got sucked in entirely.
yeah,
And
that was crazy. I mean, I think we all were slightly skeptical, but what an experience. It was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. And they sounded great.
The place sounds great. It looked great. I'm fine with Dead and Co. They're their own thing. They sometimes, I mean, they have put out some really good music. It's not what you're looking for if you're looking for Jerry, but that experience
never will be.
Was never. Yeah, there was one Jerry, but being out in the desert at the pyramids, that was that geeky.
It's so wild. Yeah.
Anyhow.
Yeah.
So
well.
the road never ends. We're still here, and we're still talking about it, and we'll continue to talk about it. And I'm grateful that there's people out there that still care and allow me to to do this.
Yes, thank you so much for being here, listening to us ramble about things that are very important to us. And let us know what your favorite Grateful Dead memories are in the comments. We'd love to read through that and see how this band has affected your life as well, because I know so many of you can resonate.
Yeah, we'd love to see some comments on this, because we're kind of riffing today outside of our thing. If you like this format, let us know. Anyhow.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.